are meeting today in Medicine Hat, Alberta. My name is RJ Sigurdsson, MLA for Highwood and chair of this committee. Now I'd ask that the committee members introduce themselves for the record. I will start to my left, then work to my right.
Good morning, Heather Sweet, MLA for Edmonton Manning.
Good morning, David Hanson, MLA for Bonneville, Cold Lake, St. Paul.
Garth Roswell, MLA Vermilion, Lloydminster, Wainwright.
Nicholas Milliken, MLA Calgary, Curry.
Now we'll move on to just a few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. The audio of today's meeting is being live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. And just to give you a bit of background on the committee, the Legislative Assembly struck this committee on March 22nd of 2021. The committee's mandate is limited to the consideration of 5 individual points, starting with 1, whether the legal remedies available to a real property owner who is deprived of the use of the real property is adequate. Number 2, whether the real property rights should be expanded or, in the case of an individual, constitutionally protected. Number 3, whether the law of adverse possession should be abolished. Number 4, whether the expropriation processes provided under the Expropriation Act are adequate. And last, any other matter that the committee decides is necessary to ensure the completeness of its review. The committee may review, as a part of its mandate, any part of the following statutes, including the Alberta Bill of Rights, Alberta Land Stewardship Act, Expropriation Act, Land Titles Act, Law Property Act, Limitations Act, and the Responsible Energy Development Act, and a review of any other act that the committee determines is necessary to ensure the completeness of its review. So far, the committee has received technical briefings from government ministries and has also received written submissions and oral presentations from identified stakeholders. We will now turn our attention to hearing presentations from members of the public. We have had 3 meetings so far. The first was a virtual meeting hosted in Edmonton last month. Then we had meetings in Edson and St. Paul. Today's meeting is the 3rd of 6 in-person public meetings planned in locations around the province. Information about these meetings can be found on the committee's website. Those interested in presenting to the committee this morning were to pre-register with the committee clerk just outside the door. Presenters will, at this point in time, do the short list that we have. We'll have an unlimited time to be able to present. At the end of the meeting, if there's any time remaining after hearing from the presenters, we will also maybe move to a little bit of questions from the committee members to the presenters just on points of clarification. Before you speak, when you approach the mic, please ensure to state your name before you move on to your presentation. And with that, we will move on to our first presenter. We have Ross Ford. Ross Ford, if you'd like to step up to the mic, state your name, and then proceed.
Good morning, committee members and Mr. Chairman. First, my name is Ross Ford. I farm in southern Alberta along the Alberta-Montana border, just east of Coutts. I'm also involved and have been for many years serving as a municipal councillor for the village of Coutts and now the county of Warner. I have occupied positions of Mayor, Reeve, and now planning chair for the county of Warner. Just a little background for you guys so you know kind of where I'm coming from. My family has farmed in the Coutts area for well over 100 years, and I'm privileged I own that land now, and along with other land that I've purchased over the years from neighbors. And so property rights are a personal thing for me as well as the people that I represent. Where I farm, my neighbors are Americans. They have property rights. I don't know if we want to go that far because they can actually shoot somebody if they don't like what they're doing on their land. But I think we need as property owners to have much better protection for what we do, and also from the overreach of it. And unfortunately, from what I've seen, most of the overreach comes from government. So I will address each item. There's the 5 items that you guys are working on, and then I've got a few extra comments and would be pleased to try and answer any questions. I wasn't quite sure what to expect today, so I'm a bit nervous. But anyhow, I shall begin. I thank the committee for allowing me to present and express my viewpoints. We'll start with the first one. Are the legal remedies available to a real property owner who is deprived of the use of their property adequate? In my opinion, I would say much more needs to be done, so no. I do fully support the changes requiring the Alberta energy regulator to notify those affected by development, and I feel that this should be expanded to all government acts and regulations where real property is involved. In many cases, landowners don't even know what, if there's plans to run a energy corridor or a highway or something. We had an individual that wanted to build a house, and it was along Highway 4, and everything was acceptable, all the setbacks and everything, but Alberta Transportation came back and said, no, we're going to put an overpass there maybe in 20 years. Well, so he was denied the ability to build a home, no form of compensation, or that's just one example. I have several. Alberta Health Services do a lot of the same. We tried to, the county warden has a number of parks in the county, and one park is run by a society, which we're very pleased that they do a great job. A few years back, they put in showers, and the water supply is from a water co-op, and they have their own little treatment system there that they do their best, but Alberta Health informed them that you will not open your park next year until you get potable water. And because the county, it's on county land, we were basically forced to put water in there, and at a great cost. The number one, they had fully intended on putting potable water down there. There was a regional line that went from Milk River to Coots, and we put a junction box close to where the park entrance is so that they could connect. The park had arranged to get mostly volunteer work to run a line down a ditch, down the road where the road goes into the park. It was had been developed. They had to go through a environmental assessment, all the stuff. It ended up costing. It was going to cost around $4,000 or $5,000 to get hooked up. About $30,000 later, they finally got water in there. So, these are some of the things when I talk about government acts and regulations. It's become so cumbersome to do anything now. It's kind of like stop. No, you can't. So that, to me, in my mind, that needs to change. And it affects property owners, whether it's a county, a landowner, a leaseholder. The amount of things that they have to go through just getting, it's onerous, and it's almost to the point where you just, no, we're not going to bother. So what else? Some landowners have actually had caveats imposed on them without knowledge or consultation. The Historical Resource Act is a good example. I myself have a piece of property that I got looking. Well, this came up when we were looking. I also am a member of the Milk River Watershed Council of Canada and the Milk River Water Users group. I'm not an irrigator, but there's irrigators on the Milk River, so definitely have water security issues down there. So we're looking to build some kind of a reservoir offstream, just to keep the irrigators keep getting shut off every year because of the water sharing agreement, and so they're trying to remedy that by, getting a supply of water and then releasing it later in the year so they can keep irrigating, because they're probably 3 and 5 years they're shut off in June, July, late June, July, and of course the worst time of the year in southern Alberta to be shut off from water. Anyhow, so in researching this, we find some of this land is part of it's on the map for the Historical Resource Act. So, and the County of Warner has experienced this as well. We recently purchased a piece of land from a landowner that supplied gravel to the County of Warner, and he was getting older, so he said, I want to sell to you guys because you treated me well, so on and so forth. So we went ahead and bought this, and we were getting ready to strip some topsoil off, and lo and behold, you're under the historical resource area. So, got to do a study, you got to do an assessment, and sure enough, they found something. So basically, the land has been seized. An area in that quarter section has basically been seized until we do a study and see if there's anything there. And so we've engaged in that process. The tab is already $40,000, and plus we can't touch it. So, and that doesn't just affect municipalities, that applies to private landowners, and we didn't even know that was there. So nobody told us. And the same with, we're looking at some private land to build a reservoir, and here, you've got this on here. And the landowner said, well, I didn't know that was there. And the same in my case, I had no idea that was there. So to me, the first thing that should have happened was they should have come to the landowner and said, hey, we think there's some significance here. And most landowners they're fine with, but many cases they're not told. So there's a number of other acts and regulations in place. The MGA. So I'm a landowner. I pay taxes every year. If I don't pay those taxes, I say goodbye to my land in 3 years. Everybody needs to pay their taxes. I feel I've been on the other side too, and I know how that is. We're trying to run an operation, and when people don't pay their taxes, that's hard to, and then it makes it worse for the other people that are paying, because then now you got to raise taxes. So oil and gas, and you've heard lots about this. I don't pay my taxes. You guys take my land away. They don't pay. It's really nothing. There's no recourse other than now, we can put a lien, but that means a lawyer, and that doesn't mean you're going to get paid ever. So that, I don't know what to do about that, but that's something I think that should be considered. And there's, the Land Stewardship Act, the Water Act. There's a number of acts in place that conservation directives, again, you may have some significant feature or on your land, but the consultation needs to happen. And while there are, in the Land Stewardship Act, there are, means for compensation, who decides that that's a special area is, you can't just have some, a bunch of activists get together and say, oh, we like this land, we should set it aside. That part of the consultation process should include the landowner all the time. So, in many of these cases, and we've seen it with what was the program called, Special Places 2000, I believe it was, where a group of people could say, yeah, this land is significant, we think, and we should, set it aside or give it some special designation. In many cases, and one individual in my area had to fight it on his own in court. And the means, landowners, individual landowners, like, they don't have the means to take on a government, whether it's right or wrong or whatever. It's not in their ability to do so. Probably said enough about that. Second one was, should real property rights be extended, or in the case of the individual, constitutionally protected? And I think you're pretty clear what I'm going to say. Absolutely yes. And this was made very clear in the Property Rights Task Force initiated by the Redford government a number of years ago. It was, and I was part of that whole process. I attended a lot of those meetings, and it was very clear that the government should constitutionally enshrine both federally and provincially, and I know we're here provincially, so what the federal government does, I don't know how much control you have over them. We'd like to have more, but that's a rather big, for another day, I think. So instead, they created the Property Rights Advocate Office, which is now gone. And to me, it was a bit redundant. It was more of a counseling service than anything else. So the third one, should the law of adverse protection be abolished? Again, I feel yes, it should be. If you own it and you have title to it, you should own it. And you should also be able to defend that right, if necessary. If somebody occupies a piece of your land without your knowledge for a time, it shouldn't give them the right to just take it from you, especially if it's deeded. The fourth one, are the expropriation processes provided under the Expropriation Act adequate? Land use planning is important, but it should have limits. And I guess I come back to who determines if it's in the public good, and that's a big one. And is it really in the public good? In some cases, you can see a highway or perhaps a utility corridor, but some utility corridors are privately owned, and they shouldn't just be able to come in and do what they want. So, in fact, I think most of our corridors are now privately owned. I mean, they're companies, but they're owned. They're not government owned. They're not owned by the people, so to speak. So, and again, how is an individual property owner able to take on a government or a big corporation? It's almost, I think you know what lawyers charge nowadays. It's upwards of $500-600 an hour. So the final one, are there any matters necessary to complete the committee's review of the Property Rights Statute Amendment Act? I think one thing that I would like to see is the province determine the jurisdictional authority of land. Is it the province's responsibility? If it is, then we're always seeing the federal government reach in and do things that are questionable. The Species at Risk Act is a good example. I'm not sure if you're aware of what went on south of here with the sage grouse. And I don't want to bring up old issues, but it was a big eye opener for a lot of people as to what there was armed marshals on some of the roads out there. Like, it was absolutely ridiculous. Didn't happen for very long, but at one point, and it's just so people wouldn't drive to make too much noise for the sage grouse, so they could do their nesting thing. And then the problem with a lot of this regulation, the Species at Risk Act, for example, a lot of the species that are listed on the Act, and I've done a lot of research on this, the county has, and the only way you get funding to study an animal is get them listed. And they may not be endangered at all. They may be significant. It might be the extent of their range, but in a lot of cases, they're not. The populations are quite large in some areas, and maybe in a particular area they struggle to survive, and it's more because of the climate we live in. I don't know if you know it's damn cold sometimes. And it's just, it's not real hospitable, even for us trying to grow crops and stuff and try and raise cattle and that kind of thing. So, I guess just on a final note, acts, regulations, orders, etc., whether they're provincial, federal, once they're in place, they're extremely difficult to get changed and or reversed, and it seems like we got more and more of them coming all the time. And most landowners, this isn't just a rural issue. I guess we're the ones that maybe experience the hurt or the adverse effects of it first, maybe, but this really does apply to anybody that owns property. It's just that once these get in place, it's so difficult to get them removed. Like, how long have you guys been working on this? A couple of years, and just government will move slow. Seems like once they're in place, then how do you get them changed? Well, it's a process. And I've always said that I think if, when it comes to rules and regulations, it seems to me, in my experience, I've been a counselor for over 20 years, and it seems like the more you can do closer to where life happens, the better. And the people that are there just kind of know better what's going on. And plus, if like me as a counselor, if my council does something stupid, then it can be changed. Like people come and hey, this is kind of ridiculous, and oh yeah, well, we never thought of that. It's easier to change, but again, municipalities are basically a creation of the province, so we're limited in what we can do. So I think I'll finish up with that, and there's perhaps other people that want to have some things to say. So if there's any questions, I'll be here or if you want to ask now, that's fine too.
Well, I think, Ross, if you're, I'll just open it up to the committee quickly while we have you at the mic right now and just see if there's any clarifying questions from any of the committee members.
Okay.
I see, MLA Milliken.
Yeah, and some of this I'm sure I could just go into the acts and find out for myself, but since I've got you here, I might as well ask. First and foremost, though, I just want to make mention we've got Drew Barnes and Grant Hunter here as well. And I also want to thank you for all your service, too, because it sounds like from in your introduction, there was a lot of things that you've done within the community, so thank you very much for all that, Mr. Ross. It is Ross Ford, right. Okay, so having a legal background myself, one of the things that you mentioned that really kind of came top of mind is this whole idea of when landowners get put in a position where they have to sort of take on the government. I know from old litigation days, being a litigator, a lot of the time people would come into the office and they don't have an extra 40 grand kicking around to deal with dealing with the roof that was supposed to be put on their house nicely and all that. So I totally get where you're coming from. Anytime there's an opportunity, I think, for us to look to a way to ensure that landowners almost get a bit of the benefit of the doubt with regards to regulations, I think that's an opportunity where we could probably make some changes that would be better for the people that may not have the resources to really fight. A couple quick questions, though. With regards to the Historical Resource Act, you've got some land that's effectively seized, in your words. If, hypothetically, it is effectively seized for good, is there compensation through that?
Actually, no. So the county Warner in the gravel pit I was talking about, the parcel's not that large. It's 12 acres, but basically they've fenced it off and we can't touch it. I mean, we can go in there, but we can't disturb anything. It's so as far as compensation, there's like it's up to us. So
okay,
we're having to pay for that and any assessment that.
I think you mentioned you're already like 40 grand deep.
Yeah. And Willow Creek, talk to them.
Okay.
Yeah. And they may be in Fort McLeod tonight, maybe, but.
And then another one that's not directly related would be going back to, you mentioned that there was one example where an individual, I think he had a development permit process, land use redesignation for a house or something along those lines, and there was some sort of plan by the government, I guess, to have an overpass there potentially in 20 years. We're not quite sure, but we're thinking that's probably going to be saved there, and that there was no compensation on that. Do you know what the notification, like often, like I'm from the city, right? And so when we have new DPs going up, it'll go for, a couple 100 yards in every direction, and everybody gets noticed. What's it like when it's on the highway?
Well, in this particular case, when there's an application for development, of course, it comes to the some of them, if they're not if in our land use bylaw, if they're allowed, then our development officer just gives them the permit and away they go. But in the process, we send out notification to a number of agencies, some utilities. In the case, it depends on what it is. This was just a housing, just a single dwelling that was to be built. So, but in Alberta Transportation has notified the Chinook Health Region, and all the utility companies, and they'll oftentimes send back comments on you should do this. But in this case, Alberta Transportation said no, we can't allow this because of it was in their plan to build an overpass there. So, and I can get the documentation for you if you wish. This is a number of years ago this happened, and the landowner just kind of, what am I going to do? And he just said, well, I guess I'm not going to build a house. So, and the same goes for areas like sewer lagoons, for example. Like the area that you were limited to develop has been expanded. So, and a lot of the landowners around these areas, it was just done. And I know we had one individual that applied, he wanted to build a house as well. And, sorry, you can't because you're too close to the Raymond sewer I don't know what he ended up doing. He had a shop there, so I think he just put a couple extra rooms in his shop, maybe. I don't know. But it's, you know, these kind of things that, you know, and what's the landowner going to do? Like, so again, I think it should be in every, you know, act and regulation that the province has.
Thank you.
Anyhow, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sorry, and I just got one supplemental question here from Emily Hansen.
Yeah, if I could, a couple of things there. So that parcel of land that you have, that 12 acres, it's basically seized and you can't really operate on it. I know what that would be worth if it was taken up as a lease by an oil and gas company. So there should be some sort of compensation. But I guess my second question is, do you still get taxed on that 12 acres?
Well, the county owns it, so we can't really tax ourselves.
Okay.
So, but in the case,
I thought it was your private land.
well, I do have some private land, but currently I farm it, and if I was to develop or want to do some kind of a development on there, then I would have to, and if they found anything, then the study would begin. And there is no, like, as far as I know, there's no means of compensation for that. So, and I didn't, like I say, I didn't even know. The only reason I found it is because I was looking for the guy that we're looking at building a reservoir on, and I got looking at this map, and it's like, oh, I didn't know this map was here. And then, oh, that's some of my land, you know. So it's like you need to let people know, and then I think if the government imposes something on you, and it may be totally reasonable, it may make a lot of sense, but if the government does it, they should cover the cost and not be borne by the landowner, because it could put them out of business, basically.
So, and then the next one is basically on the transportation issue, when you're talking about the guy that put the application in. We hear about this a lot, and one of the regulations under the Transportation Act is anything that's within 800 meters of the center line of a provincial highway, you need a permit from transportation, which a lot of folks don't even realize it affects some entire small towns, like some of my towns, the town of St. Paul. There isn't any property in town that isn't within 800 meters of that center line of the highway. So even if you want to build a fence or a garden shed, you actually have to go through a process legally of getting a permit. Yeah. We've had some businesses that were changing the operation on Main Street, and the only thing that they were changing was the sign on the front of the building, and going to be held up for 8 months before they could open up because of transportation. So we're actually working on trying to get that changed, at least on the municipal level where it goes through small towns. But that's unfortunately where a lot of people, that regulation's been on the books for a very, very long time. But until you actually put a application in for a permit to build a house or something, that's when you find out that, oops, you're too close to the center line of the highway, you can't do it. So that's a big one. But yeah, definitely legal representation is a big thing. Then you also talked about government overreach and different levels of government. So you think it's more provincial, or is it federal, or is it sometimes municipal?
Well,
a combination of
I think it can be a combination of all three, but in my experience, of course, we deal with the province through the county considerably. It's mostly province, but we're seeing more and more federal government overreach, and it comes back to, well, for example, the policing costs that now we're responsible for. What does a landowner do if they understand if you guys, if our county or our municipality has costs imposed on them, then what are you supposed to do? All you can do is pass them on. But if we're levied some kind of new tax and our taxes go, like, if they double, like, what recourse does a individual land? And it may be something that's just totally ridiculous, like the carbon tax. You didn't hear me say that, but you know, it may be something that makes total sense, but education taxes, for example, in my mind, you know, if you're an individual farmer and you operate lots of land for whatever reason, you bear more of that cost than other people do. To me, it's a people service, and yeah, society benefits from a intelligent, you know, individuals or whatever. But I'm not so sure that just because you own property, you should be, you know, covering the majority of that expense. And that applies to any kind of, you know, whether it's something in your land use bylaw or a provincial statute or anything. There's little recourse for individual property owners. I don't know if that answered your question. Hopefully.
Just before you go, Mr. Ford, we do have Emily Hunter here from Tabor Warner. He did have a quick question. If you're willing to answer
Sure.
his question as well, I think he was looking for clarification. Please proceed, Emily Hunter.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask Mr. Ford the cost to sterilize the land. You know, basically the sterilization of the land. So you have talked about the, you know, fair compensation. That was a question Mr. MLA Milligan asked. In your situation with the county for that sterilization of that land, what is the full cost that's going to be? So it's first of all, you can't use it, but second of all, it's the loss of the revenue or whatever you could actually glean from that land. And so that sterilization cost in your land, in your county, versus how much is being done because of a policy decision that was made by the government across the province. This is what I'm more interested in, and I think maybe the council or the committee's interested in.
Okay, well, that's so the county has a number of gravel pits, not that we own, but we do. You know, we have 2,400 kilometers of roads, so we need some gravel. In this particular situation, so there's gravel under there, and so to put a value on that, you know, it's like we don't know how deep it goes because we can't get on there just yet. We have, you know, probed around, and I think we just crushed 200,000 yards in that area of gravel just recently. So, you know, what's the value of a yard of gravel is anywhere from, you know, $5 to $40 a metric ton. So, you know, there's 12 acres, you might have, you know, 50,000 tons maybe. So, and then plus, you know, the cost, the actual cost that we're having to pay and I kind of get a kick out of these guys that come and do assessments. Well, of course they're going to find something. It's job creation, I guess. But yeah, as far as actual costs, I mean, we haven't really added that up, I guess. But well, all we know is what we paid out, and it's in excess of $40,000.
Sorry, I do have one more from Emily Roswell. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Ross. A couple of quick ones. In St. Paul, I had a reeve, and he asked, you know, with regards to development and the value of land that's adjacent to it and how it might be impacted, right? And his concern from a councillor perspective was, how far does that go and who pays for it, right? And whether it's provincial or municipal, and he was concerned that might create a problem. So given your council experience, just like, how do you feel about that? Or how do you manage it? Right?
Yeah, I mean, the people that are directly, like, take a power line, for example. If, you know, you have, I mean, you've got a place that you've built up, and then all of a sudden there's a power line that comes right beside you, and it's not your land. Yeah, it's like the old not in my backyard kind of thing. And I think we all realize as landowners that, you know, development's going to happen. But is it really in the public interest? And the one I'm thinking about is it's a private line that goes from Lethbridge to Great Falls, Montana. And they were, when they started out, they were pretty good, but there was a lot of games that were played as to where to put the line, and some people were adversely affected, but it wasn't their property, so it was like too bad, so sad. So, and yeah, there needs to be limits, but I think, and there needs to be limits, and you need to get stuff done. Like, you know, this can take forever to go through. You know, and I understand that, and but as far as how far do you go? Well, I think at least the adjacent landowners. You know, I don't think you need to go 2 or 3 miles out, but you should be able to look at a map and see who's going to be most affected, and just it's kind of common sense, I would say, but.
Yeah. And last question, have you ever had to deal with adverse possession, or are you aware of a situation where it was enacted?
Well, the sage grouse issue was I didn't have to deal with that personally, but I was involved because it does, you know, there's some landowners in the county have land in 40 Mile as well. So we thought, well, we better pay attention to this, and it just, you know, it limits what you can do on your land if you know, and for some can be totally ridiculous thing.
I was thinking along the lines of the squatters' rights or the.
No, I haven't been personally, and we do have issues in the county with some of our parks and some. Where people will come and just basically camp out there, and we have to keep them moving. You got to move to the next camp spot because I'm pretty sure they would try and do this adverse. So it's an issue. It's more around Ridge Reservoir. I would say we've got a number of areas that are really good camping spots, and you know, traditionally people in the area have gone there. Just you know, there's basically no rules or regulations, I guess, and you know, and we've kind of clamped down, or we have clamped down on a lot of that. So it's, you know, we've actually made it better for them in the fact that they can actually go there, and there's a road in there, and they can actually go and have a nice weekend there without, you know, digging a big hole and having mud bot competitions and so on and so forth. But we have experienced that. So yeah. Well,
at this time, we have no further questions from the committee, but the engagement we had from the committee just shows the depth and knowledge that you've provided. So I'd really like to thank you for your presentation today. I know that you said you stepped up and you're feeling a little nervous to do your presentation, but you touched on every part of the committee's mandate and provided some great solution and depth there. So, Mr. Ford, I know on behalf of all committee members, thank you for your presentation today.
And thank you. Some of you've come a long ways to be here. So, thanks.
Next for presentations, I have Joyce Stubber. Excellent. Please, just as you, once you get to the mic before you present, please state your name for the record, and then if you'd like to proceed with your presentation, we're all ears, so thank you.
My name is Joyce Stuber, and I'm a rancher south of Medicine Hat, north of Redcliffe, sorry. I just want to make some comments about this meeting, first of all. found it really poorly advertised. And if you need the response from the farmers, ranchers in our area and in Alberta, I think this needs to be cut out there a little bit different. I shared a post. This is how it started. I shared your post of the poster, and to some local ranchers, and I didn't get the response back, but I did get a neighbor saying, "Are you going?" I went, "I don't know. I don't really understand what it's about." So I did some searching on what it was about, and no one else is here. And I'm quite surprised because this is important to us as farmers, ranchers in Alberta. Like, it's huge. Again, our government, I feel like we're hiding it under the table, letting things pass, not really knowing, not knowing what's happening as owners, and it frustrates me. Now, we've had a lot of bills that have been passed in our government, again, slid under, and I'm talking federal at this time, slid under the table by the politicians. Other politicians don't even know about it, and for sure we don't know about it. Some of the things that I, as a rancher, as a landowner, would like to see addressed, and I don't know if this is for you guys, but we purchased land. It's taken up, we still don't own it legally. Our taxes are not going through the same place. This is back in 2019. Lease land is the most difficult to transfer. It's a problem. We still are clarifying a railway act, which would be classified as the special areas. It wasn't a railway back in the 30s. They started building it. They didn't continue with it, so it was built up with not a track on it. It's hard to get that put into our name. It's put in as a different part of the quarter. It's not even associated with the quarter that we own. And I don't get it. Like, it should be canceled out as a special areas. We also had some, I want to call it slough land, that years ago, back in the 30s, there must have been some kind of an opening, or what do you call, a ditch dike that opened up. Again, we had difficulties getting that land transferred over to our name. So something needs to be done for landowners to let's get this going a little bit faster. Another problem with this one was a generational farm ranch, transferring it over from one to the other. The expense was going to cost us $50,000 transferring it from my brother-in-law to our family. There's a loophole there, which, again, doesn't make any sense. If my brother-in-law transferred over to his brother, it cost $1. If they put my name on this, it was going to cost us, and it was a large amount of land, $50,000. Why would it make a difference when you have families together? So it's for my kids. It's not really for my husband, myself. We're buying this land for future generations. And it almost cost us the $50,000, but we found a city lawyer. We started with a city lawyer that was dealing with, and that was our mistake, dealing with city property. When you're talking quite a large area of land, it's important that you have a land guy, not a city property guy. And we learned that the hard way. So we've had 2 lawyers that are dealing with this land property transfer. So that's one thing that I would like to put on there. The one about the house and building it on, trying to put it on your property, we have also reached that stumbling block. Because we own land that has a lot of gas well revenue, gas well area, or gas well in that area, when you look at the map, we had no idea, but the underground map of this quarter that we would like to place a house on, there's not much area that we can do. We did not know that there was this many pipelines underneath the ground with all the rules and regulations. And I get the rules and regulations, but again, as a landowner, we don't usually see all the mapping for the underground because, we don't own our property underground. It should be our property. Lease land is another problem. You know, I've been in a farm all my life. I've been farming, ranching all my life. The lease land, our southern Alberta has probably the most lease land in the area. We pay big money for that lease land. And yes, it's a risk, but farming is a risk. We pay huge money for that lease land. It's not little because there's gas well revenue off of it. And we know that. So our price tag is way up here. If the government, and we are threatened every time there's a new election, NDP got in there, and we were scared. What are they going to do with this lease, with the gas well revenue? Are they going to take it away from us? If they take gas well revenue away from ranchers, from farmers, we are not going to make it. First of all, we're not going to make our land payment. We know that. Secondly, we are not going to be able to feed our cows. Our cows this year cost us so much money because of drought. We're changing our operation because, it's a hard life, okay? I'm looking at myself this morning going, geez, I'm really tired. How come I'm so tired? We're up, right? It's calving season. We're up 4 times in the middle of the night. We're up all day long. It's not a picnic right now, but it's fun for us because we love our job, but it's hard. So I look at the next generation and I think, wow, we're sliding. We're slipping. Our little guys are going to be, our little farmers and ranchers are going to be gone. They're not going to be able to afford this. I can tell you that much. My family, I look at it. I've got a son that works in the oil field. I have another son that works off the farm. Between my husband and I, we had 5 jobs. Obviously, I'm retired now, but we still are working hard to support this farm, this ranch. It's quite a large ranch, but it still needs other support. So we're working around the clock. We don't holiday. And I look at my kids and I'm going, what do they do for entertainment? Yeah, they rodeo a little bit. It costs a little bit of money, but that's their entertainment. So I look at this and I think, it's going to go by the wayside. Who's buying up our land all around this area? Hutterites. Hutterites have bought a lot of land. They're benefiting now because guess what's coming in to southern Alberta? Green energy. Oh, wow. I know Hutterite colonies that are getting 50 wind towers. They just purchased this land. Do you think they knew about it before it happened? I don't know. I'm just saying that comment. But I'm just going, our green energy, we hate it. We love our land. We are stewards of our land. We're going to be putting solar panels up on land. I hate it. But why wouldn't we get into this? We cannot raise that much money on our farm without solar panels, if we didn't do the solar panels. Another comment, they come in and they're offering us big money. They're offering our neighbors big money. If we say no, it's okay. We'll just get some more land. So how can we say no when we're going to be looking out our door at another solar panel, not getting any of the benefits of it? I feel like I've sold my soul to the devil putting solar panels on a quarter, on 2 quarters. I hate it. Another problem with this one, guess what kind of land that is? It's deeded land. It's not leased land. There's a regulation maybe out there saying that we cannot put solar panels on leased land. I don't know. I think there must be. We've gone to lawyers. We've had different lawyers setting up to make sure that we're getting a fair deal out of this, and it's not financial that I'm worried about. I'm worried about the future. Where are we going to be putting these solar panels that aren't going to be effective in 10 years? Where are we going to put these wind towers that might not be working because we live in a pretty cold climate? We saw what happened in Texas. I am not for green energy that it's pushing down our throats because I can't see it working on farming. The diesel we need, we don't need an electric truck to feed our cows. It's not going to work. So it's something that we need to address. I don't know if that's your guys' panel, but that's one of the things that I'd like to bring up. I giggle about the grouse because I saw that big time. As a farm owner, do you think we tell anybody if we see an endangered species out there? No way in hell. My husband won't even tell me if we see it because I do a little bit too much of this. So no, we're not going to do that. But yeah, they'll seize your land. They'll fence it off. They make more activity than we do. The cows don't hurt them. We did have an instance once when we wanted to put in a water line in the spring on our deeded property. A quarter mile down the road, there was a nest in a tree. Seen that nest quite a few years in a row. Didn't think there was any activity. We had to pay for the environmental study to make sure that hawk would plant its egg, put its eggs in there, hatch its eggs. And I'm just going, why is that up to us? We did not get to put in the water line until after the eggs were hatched and she flew away. But I just go, why is that our problem when it's the Greenpeacers that want this? Yes, we love our birds, we love all this, but it's infringing on the next step for agriculture. We need to be helping agriculture out more in here, not hindering us. What else? SEBA. That's federal. I'm a little worried about it. We were not going to participate in SEBA. How do you turn away $60,000 loan free 2 years? Wait, if you use that, and we needed it this year because of the cost of hay, if we use that, and what if we can't pay it back? Yes, you got the interest. If you don't get it back, is it going to be a $20,000 free gift to us? I don't get that, but that's what they say if you apply. The federal government put this out, and they're hiding something, I feel. What does if you apply mean? So many of my farmer rancher friends did not see that if you apply, or if you, not if you apply, if you, what's the word I want? If you need this, or if you, I can't think of the word right now. So I look at that and I think, Kate, there are going to be a lot of small farmer ranchers that will be put out of business because they got 40,000, 60,000. That might just push them over the edge. So I'm worried about that one. Education taxes, I've always thought if you've got a lot of land, you're paying a lot of money in education. Even if you don't have kids, I did have kids, I put them through the education, so I'm kind of okay with it, but it's steep. It's a lot. The water well grants. I look on CAP, look at that grant site quite a bit, and I've been looking for different things we have a co-op grazing out in the Suffield block, and we needed to put up some solar panels because it wasn't working out there. So we first have our stumbling block dealing with the grant, with the Army. We have to make sure everything is kosher, and that's worse than government, but it is government. So I looked at the CAP grants, and, a couple of years ago, there was solar panel grants available for farmers. There aren't any longer. And I'm just going, they're killing us on things that they're letting the money go to places that it sure hurts us, like it's not for us. If you did a water well, a new one, you can get $5,000 in a grant. Do you know how much it costs to drill a water well? It could be over $20,000. That is a lot of money to put out for a water well. You really need that water well. It's a drought out there. We're worried, first of all, our Suffield grazing, are we even going to get out there? There's no water. So not sure what we're doing there. We're worried about our own. Yes, I got a dugout filled out. I'm just ecstatic about dugouts filled out in our area, but we still need grass. Hopefully it's going to rain for us. The things that they came out with, they were talking about fencing off areas. They were talking about water wells. It wasn't enough money to help us out. We couldn't do it. You can't go ahead if you don't have the money. The power lines, I got to talk about them because that's another bad one in my mouth. The power lines came in, and it's the one I'm talking about from Brooks all the way across the Kamati area, across the river. They came in and they first sent some young little guys out of university to try to convince us that this is a good thing. I hate them. I don't even think this one has any power on it yet. I don't hear it buzzing. It's on our land. We had no choice to put this on our land. This is deeded land I'm talking. Yes, it went across some of our lease land too. No choice. Another problem, it doesn't pay half as good as a gas well. Why would I want this huge structure that I have had problems with people climbing up because, hey, that looks like a fun thing to do. It's on our land and it's our property. So are we responsible for that? I don't know. I hope not, but I think we would be. The compensation, that whole power line was crooked in my mind. The compensation is less than a gas well, which shocks me. I look at the power line that went out on the 120 highway, and I'm sad for those guys because, number one, they don't even own a quarter of land, most of those guys. They own acres. they have devalued that land severely by putting the power lines up along that highway. Then, they put it in the ditch. They didn't put that power line on that property of the people so that they could maybe compensate a little bit of money. They put it in the ditch. We had a situation in our county where they plowed down trees because it was not good if somebody were to run into those. It would be the county's fault, so they plowed down the trees. And the trees were beautiful. We don't have very many trees around this area. I don't know if you noticed that. So this was a big contention between the farmers that this happened with because they were a beautiful fence line. Cut them down. Guess what? They're growing back. Nobody's saying anything. So it's not an issue with the government right now, and I'm talking municipal at this point in time. But I just shake my head at some of the things that they come up with, whether it's city people that are doing the planning and not talking to the ranchers, the farmers. You need to have a little bit more of an open book for us. It's interesting. And I think that's all I have to say. I don't know if it was all about what you guys were doing because I tried to read up on it, didn't find a whole lot. So, yeah.
Ms. Stubber, yeah, absolutely. There was a lot in there, for sure. We appreciate your input. You touched on some land issues. Definitely that needs some consideration, so we appreciate that. I'll just briefly pause right now and see if we have any questions from our committee members. Yes, MLA Roswell, please go ahead.
I've heard this a few times now that no one knows what's restrictions or things that are attached to the land. Are they, like I'm not a big landowner, but I mean, does, like, isn't there liens or like, isn't it listed on the property or like, how can you find that out?
Well, there's some things going around right now in southern Alberta about alloidal title. And I don't know enough about it, but I'm investigating in it. So way back when the settlers came in here, there was alloidal title. As it's changed through the generations, I don't think it's alloidal title anymore. Alloidal title means you own your land all the way down. Okay. Generations, yes, if they're 100 years back, they may have alloidal title. Leased land, we will never have alloidal title on. It would only be deeded land. But you know what? With Trudeau coming in and making all these different bills that have been passing, we do not own our land anymore. We do not have the right. We own our land. We don't have the rights to our land at all. They could come in and say, we're taking it. And we fear about the lease land. My dad just passed away last year at 97 years old. And when I was a little girl, I hardly remember it, but he had lease land. No, he had some lease land that was titled to us for 99 years. That was the titles back then. Now they're 10 years, I believe. One day, a politician must have come in and said, you know what, that'd be a really good community pasture. They took away 2 quarters from my dad. We were small, out by 7 persons, irrigation. It was a hard life. Took the land away from him and put it into an irrigation community pasture. My dad at 97 still cried about that, still talked about that, and was angry about that. And back then, he didn't have machineries, whatever. They offered him to take down his fence, and he could take his fence and wire away. And I'm thinking back then, it was lease land, I get it, but he did have a lease agreement for 99 years. I look at our lease and I'm going, okay, what would the government do with our land, our lease land? We are stewards of the land. We love the land. We take care of the land. We go after the gas well companies if they open a fence or leave some crap out there or dig a ditch and a cow dies in it. That's, it's a problem. But we don't have a guarantee of even 10, 15 years truly on this lease land. We don't have a guarantee of that income of revenue. We have, let me tell you, we have debt that we were hoping that we're having a lengthy period of time on, but do we have that? It fears us. It stresses us. So.
Thank you. Emily Roswell, you have a follow-up?
No, that's good. Yeah, thank you.
Good. Anyone else? Further? Yeah, Emily Milliken, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mrs. Stuber. super appreciate the presentation. There was a lot in there. More comments than anything else. I think we've got your contact information, and that's going to lead to you and I probably having to have a conversation, because you mentioned something. Every time I hear of something where regulations or something along those lines, where the same result or the same service is inequitably valued, and what I mean by that is it can cost, if you go down one path that leads to the same effective result, it costs X, and if you go down a different path, it can cost you, in this case, 50,000 times as much, and the effective result is still the same. I think it was brother-in-law to brother versus brother-in-law to yourself, or something similar to that. And then you also mentioned that you had 2 lawyers working on it in order to fix it, or at least to get around it, or whatever. Not judging on that one, but that's cost prohibitive to a lot of people. And so all I can see is that there are people who are getting dinged in a way that maybe they shouldn't be. And then it reminds me of like tax law or whatever, where once you find out later, you have to go back cap in hand and be like, but it's only a mistake because we didn't know, so those kind of things. So I'll have to talk to you about that. And then the other thing, really, you talked a lot about various things, but you did hit some of our mandate really kind of head on. And one of them, which we've talked about and heard about from lots of people, is in similar situations, not necessarily the exact same one, but you were talking about the power lines going down the highway and how you've got, in this area, you've got people who might only have acres, not quarters. And so they're really, really, any kind of devaluation to their land can affect them relatively, really heavily. And so those are that's just a comment though. That's something that we're looking at for sure. Yeah. So thank you.
I'm just sad that the power poles weren't put on their land, because at least they would have gotten a little bit of.
They would have got some cash flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just found that ridiculous when I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it.
And I look at that and I thought, okay, a tree I could have hit, but now I got a bigger power pole. It's a little bit more of a brick wall that I could hit. That doesn't matter because government ran that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. We are about a little over halfway through our time allowed here, but we don't have any additional speakers registered to speak at this time. If anybody does wish to be on the record to the committee and would like to speak at this time, if they just want to approach the mic and state their name, they can go ahead with the presentation. If not, we will, being that it's halfway through, take a break, but I'll just briefly pause to see if there's anybody wishing to speak at this time. We have one. Please go ahead.
I'm not sure if, as an MLA, it was inappropriate for me to do this, but I did want to bring to the committee this issue that was brought to me.
Before you start, I apologize. Please just state your name, title, and then proceed with the
Grant Hunt for the MLA for Taber-Warner. So I've always been concerned about, when someone takes their own money to buy land and then it's sterilized, or some policy decision that a government made or a bureaucrat made affects their ability to earn a living on that land, or which is really a constitutional right, but someone says no, or even neighbors determining what you can do and what you can't do. I get that if you are downwind from a hog farm, that's going to have a material effect on someone. But I was introduced to a guy, not in my riding, but when I was red tape reduction minister, and he was telling me about how he had bought this land, and it was up in I won't say where. But he was saying how his neighbors were complaining about the noise that he was creating. So he wanted to have a place where people could come from the city of Calgary, come out and learn about farming. So he had, certain animals that kids from schools could come out and learn about, animal husbandry. And he had garden plots where they could learn what, certain types of things are growing in different soils. And it was, such a fantastic thing in terms of being able to teach kids and teach people from the city what rural Alberta offers and what farming offers. And he was driven out. He was an entrepreneur. He was really interested in different ideas. And one of the things he wanted to do was he had a really beautiful barn that he had reconditioned, and he wanted to have events in there. And so his neighbors, there was a bunch of acreages and stuff a little bit further from him. But because of the law, if he wanted to have the ability to have, corporate parties and stuff like that in there, he had to get the permission of the neighbors. And so what happened was, they'd have to kind of drive by their neighbor's place to get down to his place. And the neighbors said, no, we don't want the noise. We don't want to have, vehicles coming by, and if it's at night, then they're, shining on us. They made all sorts of excuses. But here's a guy that was an entrepreneur. He was trying to do something or work the land, or, I thought they were really creative ideas that he had. And he ended up selling his land, moving back to Toronto or Ontario, somewhere. And I just thought, what a shame that we had a very a strong entrepreneurial guy who came here, was actually creating commerce, was also helping to, educate people from the city about, what farming life is like. And because of the way that we have our property laws, he wasn't able to work his land. He was actually literally driven out. And I wanted to put that on the record so that you knew that I really believe strongly that the constitutional right to be able to buy, own, and work land is so critical to a prosperous nation and a prosperous people. Without that ability, we will sterilize not only the land, but we'll sterilize the initiative of our people. And I hope that you will be able to take that back, and that will be part of your deliberations as you think about the importance of, what you're doing here. And I could go on about other experiences that was presented to me as well, but I just wanted to present that here today.
Thank you, MLA Hunter. I'll briefly pause again if anybody else would like to come forward, be on the record for the committee. There is time to do so right now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Drew Barnes, MLA, Cypress Medicine Hat. I want to thank each and every one of you for your work and coming to Medicine Hat and hearing about this very important issue. And that's where I want to start, how important it is. Property rights are, deep down, people understand that property rights are one of the pillars of building wealth, creating wealth, transferring our hard work and our wealth to the next generation. And what I want to talk about today is in this very room in 2011, there was probably 400 local people here alarmed about at that time the PC government was doing with the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, Bill 36, which was a planning mechanism to direct some planning and some water, but at the time had some draconian facts, including being able to take away a title or a covenant attached to that title without full and fair access to courts and appeal and without full and fair compensation. The importance to landowners was expressed very, very well by Joyce and Ross when we talk about how much of people's heart and how much of people's effort is into their land holdings. And we're talking in southern Alberta, a lot of farms and ranches that are well past 100 years in the same family. I know of some ranches that are in the 6th generation. And this is what, of course, people have used to store their wealth and pass on their hard work and make our economy strong. But it's also important in situations for water rights, for those kind of things, particularly important in southern Alberta, where I think up to 85% of our land is lease-owned, not deeded, A lot of this land has never, ever been deeded, never, ever put to a title by a government. So it makes it all the important for these good stewards to take care and make it important. So important in a bigger way. A census just came out for the city of Medicine Hat about 2 months ago, saying that in the last 5 years, our population had only increased by 11 people in 5 years. How directly that is related to the government overreach, and they talked, both Ross and Joyce talked about the Sage Grouse Protection Order and the Federal Species at Risk Act from the federal government, but also the fact that a lot of these opportunities have been challenged down here. And I want to back up to the Federal Species at Risk Act and what it did with the sage grouse for a second. Historically, there was lots of sage grouse here. A lot of sage grouse were here when there was a lot of ranchers and farmers in southern Alberta, protecting and developing opportunities for their habitat. Because of West Nile, because of drought, because of a lack of fewer and fewer people, numbers plummeted dramatically. And when the federal government, about 10 years ago, put in the Environmental Protection Order to protect the sage grouse, what it did do was a regulatory taking that, as Joyce mentioned, meant people had to change their grazing habits. The city of Medicine Hat at that time was in partnership in an area called the Many Berries Oil and Gas Field. Them and another, the city of Medicine Hat didn't go broke, but a company they were partnered with did go broke in their oil and gas exploration, costing local people tremendous amount of jobs, costing the people of Medicine Hat tremendous wealth in the creation of this. And I believe to this day, the city of Medicine Hat Oil and Gas is still suing the federal government over the implementation of the Sage Grouse Protection Order. So why I mention these things in this order is from the UCP platform from 3 years ago in the election was a commitment to fix Bill 36 and a commitment to look at compensation for landowners who are affected by regulatory takings like the Sage Grouse Protection Order was. So again, I know that it's been my involvement over 10 years of talking about these things. And I think a lot of Albertans, particularly in southern Alberta, where our economy has been a bit challenged, would like to see these things actually happen. I want to talk about the second part of this as well, the squatters part, the adverse possession. I believe what has been talked about and what has been recommended is a situation where a squatter may have recourse in the courts, but not the opportunity to take the title. And I wish I had more examples of this, but I know of one example where for many, many years, decades, two neighbors on a farm, driveways were accidentally on each other's land. Adverse effects that maybe, if they can't work it out amongst themselves, maybe they need the help of our court system. But again, I see no reason why that should ever have an effect on title. So I would encourage this committee to work towards that and give people the full opportunity for those situations that may have arisen innocently, accidentally, not deliberately. But again, the fact of when it does happen deliberately, and it is the title that's in play, I think it would be wrong to allow that to happen, and I think this committee needs to look at making sure that doesn't happen. So again, I'll sum up this way. Over 10 years ago, I believe 17 Wild Rosers were elected principally because of property rights from what the PC government was doing with the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, with Bill 50, the transmission lines that we're all paying the price for now. Joyce talked lots about the cost of green energy. and how we're all paying for that now. And I think it's crucial on the wealth creation and the future of Alberta to enhance property rights, give individuals the opportunity to create wealth, to store that wealth, and then to sell it to another Albertan. So thank you again for your work. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you for that. At this time, I'll just briefly pause to see if anybody else wants to approach the mic and speak at this time. Seeing that we have no other speakers, but before we do break, I would just like to briefly comment that we also have in the room a former Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, Robert Warner. I want to thank you for showing up today and thank you for being here. And I just wanted to recognize you as I saw you had registered and come into the room, so appreciate you being here today. And at this time, as we have no further speakers, I'm going to pause, but anybody wishing to speak, please approach the clerk and or a committee member. We will convene at a committee at any given point in order to make sure everybody has the opportunity to adequately get on record for this community, to this committee, sorry. But at this time, we will brief until that point. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're going to reconvene here. I do believe we have one additional speaker that would like to come and be on record to the Real Property Rights Committee. So at this time, we will open up the mic. Please state your name and then proceed with your presentation.
Okay. Oh, hang on to this now that I broke it. Anyhow, Ronald Huvenars. I'm a farmer in Hayes, Alberta. I'm also a member of the Action Surface Rights Association. We do have a member presenting this evening. Daryl will be much better at the details and any questions you might have. But at the same time, I just thought I should mention I do appreciate the committee coming out like this. We have been more of an online world these last 2 years, and the province has reached out to our group for consultation on a few of the bills, such as the Geothermal Bill, and we do appreciate that. I'm a little concerned. It almost seemed like a bit of a bait and switch kind of a thing. I know when we were consulting on the Geothermal Bill, we mentioned when these licenses were going to be transferred, we didn't see anywhere where the property owner would be notified, and we found that concerning. They said that would be put in, and it seemed to be, but at the same time, Bill 82 was coming through the works. That came through, and there is no notification of a property owner when a lease, when this lease and this license is on his land and it's transferred to another company, and you're not even notified about this. That's also somewhat in effect here on all energy leases. They can be transferred from one company to the next through the AER. I believe it would be, at the very least, a courtesy to notify that you have a new renter on your land. So, anyways, I find that somewhat concerning. I know in the MD of Tabor, there are some leases being applied to be transferred through the AER from one operator to the next, and the operator that was looking to take over these leases has not paid his MD taxes in the last 2 years, and the farmer was not notified it. He just happened to see some people driving around checking out certain wells, and he thought something was up, and he started looking into it. Anyways, I find things like that concerning. Also, I guess the AER website, when you're trying to search on certain leases and certain decisions that have been made, I have to say it's quite a frustrating website. And now, at this time, I believe the train of thought is, well, you should be checking to see what's going on with the licenses on your land. And if you do go onto that website and start searching things, I've entered the same words or the same names. I don't know if I actually punched in the actual well site location 15 minutes apart, and I will not get the same results from the AER website. I will not be able to find back that license 15 minutes later of punching in almost the identical words, and I find that somewhat concerning. It's almost like, would you call that trying to hide something? I don't know. But anyways, just a few concerns I have. Another thing to keep in mind when you are dealing with federally, like the Species at Risk Act, generally, I would have to say, like everything else, 99% of the people are doing their best. We are caretakers of the land, but when you see the potential that you see something, it's the same thing last year. When I was a kid growing up, I've lived on the same farm my whole life. Maybe once in 10 years you'd see a moose come burning through or something like that, traveling through the elk water. Now we see them almost every other year. Last year there was a cow that had a calf. She raised it around our farm, through our fields. I would be driving by. It'd take me like 30 seconds, but you know they'd put a run on them running through a field to get up to a check to clean the screens for my pivot. Well, I'll stop back around and drive 5 miles around just to leave them alone, so I don't put a run on them, kind of a thing. We basically care about the nature that we see around our places, and minimal damage. I don't think anybody blinks an eye because we're always losing money somewhere. So $5 here or there isn't going to kill us. So, anyways, and the greater damages, there is a process. I've never ever went through it. I don't know how fully it is or not, but I guess getting back to, you have to watch when I start talking. I do tend to ramble on. Anyways, the species of Rizak, we do worry about these things. We care about these things. But all of a sudden you see something you haven't seen in a long time. Do you think there's a chance in hell you're going to mention it? It's not going to happen. And we may go out of our way to protect them, but we're not going to mention it publicly because things are going to disappear, things are going to get taken away from you, and we won't be compensated. So anyways, that part is a great concern. So other than that, I think that's about all I have at this time. Once again, thank you for coming out. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And as a committee, we appreciate your presentation. We have a few minutes here, not a whole bunch of time. Did the committee have any clarifying questions? I don't see any at this time, so I will, I see in the back, Mr. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Just in the interest of that, we roughly have about just 5 minutes before the conclusion of this meeting. So just in the interest of time, so we don't have to interrupt the next speaker, I will just ask for the committee for a 10-minute, if anybody objects to a 10-minute extension to this committee meeting, so I'll only ask one question. Does anybody object to extending the meeting for an additional 20 minutes? Seeing none, we'll extend the meeting to then 11:10. To the next presenter, Mr. Robert Warner. If you please approach the mic, state your name, and then proceed. Thank you.
Yeah, you have 37 seconds, 20 seconds? My apologies, I wasn't sure if I should say my name. Robert Warner, I'm a resident of Medicine Hat, Alberta, and I will be brief, although speakers don't get much of an opportunity to speak, so one does take opportunities when they do arise. I too would like to thank you for coming here. I've noticed by listening to the people that have presented today that communication is really a very critical part of the relationship between residents and the representatives that represent them in that collective group called our legislature. I must tell you that particularly the advertisement, the communication around the hearings, etc., I think my peer may have made reference to that, or my former peer may have made reference to that. So I want to emphasize to the committee, again, the importance of letting the residents know. I have a feeling that and I recognize that I'm going to be touching on issues that probably go beyond this committee, but I believe indirectly they tie back to this committee in so many ways. This is I think shared by even my former peer and myself and many, many others. This is the forgotten corner of the province. The people down here believe that we don't sometimes get our fair due of attention. And I want this committee and other MLAs to really appreciate that point and don't leave our area without believing that that's real. When you're from an area of the province that is less populated, has fewer political seats than most other areas of the province, whether it's caused or it's consequential, it causes a sense of limited communication, which I believe cultivates a sense of mistrust that is sometimes unnecessary. It's the age-old story I'm sure we've all heard. Communication, communication, communication. There's never enough communication. If we want to speak to the importance of good public policy that represents all of our province, don't underestimate the importance of good communication with the people and particularly the people of this section of the province. Property for agriculture, for living, both for the urban and rural, is a means of creating a living for all of us, not just the property owners and the managers of the land, but it's a means of production of food and the essentials that every society needs. And in this particular area, I recognize that it goes beyond the mandate of your particular committee. However, our section of this province has been facing and will most probably face severe drought. When you live in this area as long as I have, and as many of the people that you presented you today, drought is going to hurt this area in a big, big way. And that is going to impact the supply of food products, not only the livelihoods of people down here, but the food products and that infamous new language of the supply chain limitations, which is going to cause supply and demand problems and consequential costs. Finally, I would just leave with more of a... When I was elected as the MLA for this area and had the great privilege of trying to contain comments that were unnecessary in the House, that I couldn't identify quite who they were, although I recognize at least one face up here that may have been a part of that. On both sides of the House, by the way. I didn't know what Treaty 7 was. I didn't know what Treaty 6 is. That was a very transformative, and I still keep that picture, Dave. It's hanging in our family room, of the Indigenous history of our province and our country, and across this province, it's deeply rooted. And so I leave you with this concept and thought. When you're talking about property rights, I want you to reflect, if you can, and read back about the history of our area. I have 11 grandchildren, and I tell every one of them. They tell me that I tell them more than 100 times the same story, but it's this. If you want to know where you're going, it's important to know where you have been. And where we have been in this province, and where we are in this particular section of the province, this land has 1,000 years of Indigenous peoples settled who traveled this land, and their sense of property was different than ours. Not necessarily right or wrong from ours, it was different. But when you're talking about property and you want to develop policy into the future, I think there's insights that can be earned by listening. And I know that several of you come from areas where Indigenous people are a significant portion of the population. And I urge you to not forget that component of the policy formulation process that you're looking at. And I think that will add insight and added value to a policy direction that goes beyond today. So I'm very brief, and I don't think you'll need those other 5 minutes. But thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for being here. And I urge you and your peers, whichever government is going to be in power in the future, that you do more of this outreach, because it's not just about the policy and the subject matter. It's about the communication and the relationship that you have with the people you represent. And don't ever, ever underestimate that. Thank you very much.
I know on behalf of myself and the committee, Mr. Warner, thank you for your comments and your highlights there today. Also, on behalf of this committee, we also recognize the importance of being down here in Medicine Hat. We want you to know that it was very important for us as a committee to get down to Medicine Hat, to be in this part of the province, to be able to have this engagement portion. We definitely understand and want to make sure that Medicine Hat area does not feel like a forgotten part of this province, and this is why we're doing this public in-person engagement and trying to get out to all of these areas. So thank you again today. At this point in time, if there's nothing further, is there any additional comments from committee members? Thank you. Seeing that there's nothing else, I'll leave one pause. I'll actually pause briefly here. We do have a limited amount of time, less than 5 minutes, but I'll briefly pause just to see if there's any further speakers. Seeing none, I'd like to thank everyone that came out today to Medicine Hat to speak to our committee. A lot of great input today, highlighting issues that we will take back for deliberation and consideration as we move towards our report. I'd like to let everybody know that our next meeting will be tonight at Fort McLeod at 7 p.m. from 7 until 9 p.m. this evening. As well, we have Hannah tomorrow at 1:30 to 3:30, and Eckville the day following from 10:30 to 12:30. At this point in time, I will call for a motion to adjourn. Moved by MLA Hanson that the meeting be adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, that motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.